Shalom and welcome to the Middle East Report. Israel's at war, and in this programme we'll be discussing how we can stand for Israel and fight Jew hatred. Warm welcome to the programme. I have two special guests from North London. They're both husband and wife, but they're making a huge difference for Israel and the Jewish people. I'm joined by Tim Gutmann and his lovely wife, Hayley Ace. Hi. So welcome to the programme, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for having us again.
Thank you.
And I've got to say, well done for what you're doing for Israel and the Jewish people, particularly this very critical time in Israel's history and with rising hatred towards the Jewish people. Yeah. That you both are making considerable difference by organising these big rallies for Israel, letting the Jewish people know that they're not alone and expressing that Christian love. So it's an absolute honour to have you both on the programme. Tim, I know that recently you were on Politics Today and talking about the prayer vigil that you'd organised in Golders Green that the police told you to cancel, and we unpacked that. But it's so important, isn't it, this time of rising hatred, this time of hatred and dissensions and divisions, particularly when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people, that we have a united front. But do you want to share your remarkable testimony? But before we do that, can you just share about your Jewish heritage, the fact that your family comes from Germany and had to escape during the rise of Nazism, Hitler in Germany in the 1930s.
Sure. So my grandfather was actually a survivor from the Holocaust, and he fought for Germany in World War I and got an Iron Cross. And so when he was arrested and interrogated, I think that's how he managed to escape with his life. And he came to the UK via America. Now, his parents, that would be my great-grandparents, his father was murdered or died around Kristallnacht. I know a lot of Jewish people committed suicide, and they stole his business, which was a mill. And his mother, she was elderly at this point, and she went first, I think, to Theresienstadt, and then another concentration camp, and then she ended up being marched on the Death March and shot in the back of the head at Marley Trostinek. And so I think, for me, looking into my family history, and learning a lot about the past, about anti-Semitism, and particularly the role, the visible church, the banner of the cross, knowing what role that played has given us a passion and a real kind of like fire to do something today in our generation.
Amen. And Hayley, it's great to have you on the programme. Do you want to just share a little bit about your background? Because you come from New Zealand, don't you?
I do.
Share with us your family history.
Okay, well, I'm a minister's daughter. And first of all, it was a missionary. Born in New Zealand, went to Africa. My parents sold everything they had and we went to Africa, and we lived in Kenya, went around Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and then settled here in the UK. And so, I've got this heritage of a tribal mother who's a Māori woman and a white New Zealand father.
Excellent. And what does that mean, having that heritage? Because we all know about the haka from the rugby, and particularly when we see the All Blacks when they take to the field. So share with us something about the haka and certainly something about the Maori tribe.
Well, in New Zealand, it's made up of many different tribes, and there are some bad things that we did in the past, like cannibalism. Don't do that anymore.
I'm pleased. That's reassuring.
Pleased to say that. And the haka we do for kind of special events like funerals, weddings, engagement parties and things like that. And most people see them at the beginning of rugby. When we beat England.
Absolutely.
Can I just say that she's from a warrior family, and Hayley really is a warrior. And, that tribal... Actually, I find a lot of similarities with Israelis. She's really good at speaking to Israelis. She's very, feisty and very straightforward. You know, I think that's part of your heritage, isn't it?
Excellent. And Tim, you got a remarkable story, haven't you, of how you came to faith, and particularly how much, as you know, when you were young, you're involved in crime, and the Lord rescued you from a life of crime and a life of prison in His grace and His mercy. Do you want to just share your story? I know that some of viewers may have heard this, but I think it's so important because it really tells our viewers and it tells us who you are.
Absolutely. So, you know, like you said, I did fall into the wrong crowd, and there was stuff in my past I think, you know, I was struggling to deal with, and I ended up, you know, hanging about with the wrong sort of people. That's what people say, but actually, you know, these were my friends growing up, but we did get into crime, and I won't go into too much detail because I never like, you know, glorifying the crime, but what I do want to glorify is that at one point, you know, I was about to do something that was wrong, and I heard the voice, which I know was God, and I heard the Lord say, Tim, don't. And it was almost audible to me. I feel like it was audible, but no one else heard it. And I said to the guys who was with me, I said, I'm not doing this. And they're like, oh, Tim, come on, do it. And I said, no. And I walked off, and I looked around, and I could see 3 plainclothes police officers in the stairwell of a tower block by where I was, and I could tell they'd set up this sting to arrest me because we were doing a lot of stuff. And I really feel like, you know, once you get arrested, you know, maybe go to prison or whatever, it's like a life, isn't it? And so I went home and I grabbed any Bible I could find. My dad had a 1-year Bible. At this point, he'd found Yeshua as his Lord. Started reading it. I didn't really know what I was reading, and then, you know, I used to do this every night, pray, and eventually I heard the voice of God say, Tim, I want you to preach my gospel.
Amazing. And Hayley, obviously coming from a family that are missionaries, Christianity is like in your DNA.
Yeah.
But share with us how you came to that personal revelation that Jesus Christ or Yeshua HaMashiach was your Messiah.
You're right, I was brought up in a Christian home, so I always had those values and attended church and got involved in youth. And I entered into the secular workplace, and I did sort of legal advising for many, many years. And then I had this point in my life where just before I went to university, went to Loughborough University, and I realised that it's not enough that I'm riding on the coattails of my parents, that their salvation is not going to be my salvation, and it has to be real and it has to be authentic, and I have to have my true own relationship. And so I just sat down and spoke to the Lord in my room privately with a youth Bible. In those days, they used to have a really cool youth Bible that gave you prompts, and I used to just sit and read every night, and I just had this amazing revelation of who God was for me, and this relationship that was special for me, not just because I got through with my parents.
Amazing. And when did you reconnect with your Jewish roots, Tim? And when did Israel and your Jewish identity become very aware and very evident? Because it really does drive everything you do now, including being a pastor of your church as well.
Absolutely. And obviously growing up, my father gave us this kind of like identity, if you like, and it really affected him. Obviously, his own father was a Holocaust survivor. And so growing up, I was aware of my background. And actually at school, I remember at primary school, some kids were calling me Jew boy. So they seemed to know who I was. And, but actually, it wasn't until when I first became a believer and I was getting into the Bible. I actually remember because when I got saved, actually we were going out.
Yeah.
And Hayley's parents were pastors. And I used to say to your mum, I used to say, why does God have a chosen people? And she was like, well, because, you know, he made this covenant, and she explained to me. And I think looking into that and then researching my own background and realizing the link between Christianity and where it's separated, you know, the Jewish roots were ripped out of the church. I think then it was like, there's no going back, you know, I really can see something that I think is, you know, it's not just a revelation, it's like, this is a truth that was torn away from the church by wrong teaching and replacement theology. And from that moment on, it kind of like defined my ministry, if you like. Yeah.
And Hayley, when did you have a revelation of God's love and plan for Israel and the Jewish people?
I think because my mum's a Maori, and we're always taught tribes, you know, they have an indigenous land. As a Māori woman, I know my indigenous land is New Zealand, and reading the Bible and having a Māori mum would always say the Jews their indigenous land is Israel. So it was kind of, there was no one moment that I realised because it was already in me. But I think I certainly, with Tim teaching me about how relevant, and how important it is for Christians to actively be working towards, having relationships with Jewish people and caring and reaching out, was certainly Tim.
Amazing. And Tim, do you want to share what your church does in terms of Israel? Because I've been at a couple of speaking engagements that we've shared together, both of you, which has been really nice over the last few weeks during this horrific time of what's been happening in Israel. And just share with us how, as a church, you are really reaching out and showing that practical love to the Jewish people. And I love the story of the car that you provided for the Orthodox Jewish family.
Yeah. So we, like Hay said, we wanted to reach out to our local Jewish community there in North London. And, as a church, we've prayed for Israel every week for decades now, I reckon, for a long, long time. And, it's a part of who we are. So we always say, it isn't just one thing we're about, but it's one of, we love the mission, we love, worship and prayer, but Israel is a part of that, and it's on our website. But we said, listen, we need to put this into action. How can we show our love and how can we stand with the Jewish people where we live? So reaching out to the local rabbis, one of them actually met with me, he was an Orthodox rabbi, a good friend of ours now, had a coffee, and I said, what can we do? How can we show you as Christians, because we believe we've got a debt of gratitude to you, and we believe, that Jesus, the scriptures, all of this has come from you guys, and we just want you to feel loved. What can we do? And he said, listen, I'll tell you what, our children, we struggle to get them to school in Stamford Hill. It's like over an hour each way, and we're all studying, as part of our rabbinical studies, and we're really struggling. So I went back to the church, and I said to the team, I said, what can we do? We put it out to the church and said, listen, we need a minibus, because there's actually a lot of kids, and let's take a special offering. And within one Sunday, we raised £32,000. It was a real miracle. And we got this minibus, so we drove the kids to school and back. And it's opened up doors. There's so much stuff we do with the synagogue now. We volunteer on security. We're often at each other's events. And we're just great friends, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. And what is that like to actually interact with the Jewish community? I mean, the Orthodox community is very closed off from the mainstream Jewish community. So to be able to reach out to them is pretty special.
It is, and it's so wonderful because it's very natural as well, because we're all just human beings, and just to have that breakdown. And I think one of the big things we had to do is to build that trust, to show that we're not trying to just go in and trying to convert them, that there's not a hidden agenda, that we're just there to, let's just get this friendship so we can convert you. And it's actually just because we want to show love in action. And, Christians have done a lot of harm for a long time, so we have to come from a different angle of friendship and true love and care. And so I think they feel that, and then it's just natural. So we went to one of the rabbis' children's very special upshearing last night, and celebrated with them and ate with them, and it was just like a normal family get together, which has now helped us reach so many more of the Jewish community in just trust and friendship. Which is amazing, yeah, really amazing.
And Tim, sadly we have to turn our attention to the horrors of what occurred on Saturday, the 7th of October, the biggest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history, where over 1,400 Israelis were murdered by Hamas, another 200, maybe even 300 taken as hostages, taken back to Gaza. Over 4,000 injured, many of those critically. The nation of Israel's reeling. What are your thoughts on that horrific day, that this was the largest massacre of Jewish people on one single day that we have not seen for over 80 years, and the last time we saw that was the Holocaust? What are your thoughts?
It's traumatic on many levels. Number one, like you said, the scale of it, and the numbers killed. This is the worst, like you said, since the Holocaust. Number two, the barbarity. It's like, you read about stuff in the Middle Ages, and, as part of my research, I saw post-Holocaust pogroms that took place led by priests in Poland, and I was like, how could that happen in 1950? But here we are in 2023 with a kind of barbarity and savagery. I mean, it was shocking, and I think it was a wake-up call to really what was going on. Hamas has got that same spirit, if you like, as Hitler and Haman and the Amalekites. Some people say, it's like this murderous, demonic anti-Semitic spirit. But I think also what was traumatic was the response around the world, like literally the next day. There was protests. It's like they were celebrating. People had pictures of parachutists, and they were on the streets waving Palestinian flags. There wasn't time for the Jewish people to grieve. Straight away, they're being attacked. And for the third thing for us, personally, what was really upsetting as well was the silence, I think, with a lot of churches, a lot of church leaders. And what I felt at the time was it's almost as if they were waiting for Israel to respond so they could say, we're praying for civilians on both sides, rather than just go straight in and say, this is traumatic, this is awful, this is evil, we condemn it and we stand with Israel. So it was traumatic in many different ways. And I know a lot of Jewish people have, they've not been sleeping properly. There's a fear. This has led to a severe increase in anti-Semitism. And I think for us, we're feeling it as well. And I know you will as well. We're feeling it, we're carrying it in many different levels.
Yeah. And Hayley, what was your response to this as a mother? Because particularly when we look at Kibbutz Barrett or Kibbutz Kfar Aza, I mean, we essentially saw absolutely horrific crimes, things we haven't seen since the Holocaust, or in some cases worse than the Holocaust being committed by Hamas. I mean, I think we have to just describe this. There were 3,000 Hamas terrorists that breached the Eretz crossing and the border crossing, that went on this murderous rampage against those Jewish communities. And having visited those communities only last December, those kibbutzes are beautiful, they're immaculate, the people are amazing. And then to just murder them in the way that they were murdered, there should be huge international condemnation around the world.
Of course there should. It's really unimaginable. I don't think anyone can even imagine the act of what they did when they took a baby alive and put it into an oven in front of its own mother. I mean, the hatred that you have to do, the satanic, demonic hatred that would drive you to do something so evil, to rape children until their pelvises broke, and elderly women. The barbarity is unimaginable. It's something that you couldn't even imagine in a horror film. And so the fact that they have not been outright condemned across the board is quite unimaginable, and it breaks my heart. And the fact of them recording it, there were so many levels of brutality and torture, and it was like a real game as well. And then I can't imagine, no mother could imagine their child dying, let alone dying in such a cruel, prolonged way. And then also the unknown, because there are so many. There's 240 that we potentially who knows where.
Absolutely.
And what's happening to them.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN news report that just reminds us of the horrors that took place on that terrible day, which was Saturday, the 7th of October, 2023.
We first bring you a story about one kibbutz, Kfar Aza, that symbolizes what happened to so many communities on October 7th. More than 1,400 Israelis died, many of them civilians brutally murdered in their homes. George Thomas brings us their story.
Israel, land of Israel, has an honor, and the honor is God Almighty.
October 5th, 2 days before Hamas would go on their killing spree.
Welcome again to Sha'ar HaNegev. You've been here last year, and I hope to see you again next year.
More than 600 Christians from 50 countries visited areas in southern Israel close to Gaza's border. Ophir Lipstein, a well-known mayor, welcomed the Christian guests, taking a unity tour of the country.
I promise to do everything to keep the land of Israel, to keep the land of this area, and build it stronger and stronger. And I'm so happy to see you all from all over the world and come to see this beautiful place.
48 hours after making those brief remarks, the 50-year-old mayor, who lived in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, less than 2 miles from the Gaza Strip, awakened to the noise of rapid gunfire.
On that October 7th morning, Mayor Ophir came running down these stairs because he could hear the gunfire right outside his home, not knowing what was going on. He came down this road, one of the main arteries of the kibbutz, and then he encountered a Hamas fighter, and they shot him, and he died right here.
David Parsons of the International Christian Embassy lost a close friend that day.
The death of Mayor Ophir Lipstein, a good friend of the embassy, it was surreal that we were here 2 days before, and it's made it very personal for us.
70 Hamas fighters descended on kibbutz Kfar Aza that morning, going house to house. Omar Abu Rusha, a member of Hamas's elite naval commando force, reportedly took part in the civilian massacre at Kfar Aza.
شو قال لكم بدكم تقتلوا كل واحد كل اللي بتشوف
بتشوفوا بتقتلوه ويرجع بعدين
ما في فرق بين رجال نسوان اولاد الكل.
This graphic mapping shows the exact locations in the kibbutz where Rusa and his accomplices murdered 58 residents of Kfar Aza, including 40 children. Hamas also took 17 hostages.
Radical Muslims like to say they love death, we love life.
Yeah, we always say, Golda Meir said it the best, and she said that this war will end when they love their children more than they hate us.
Knesset member Sharon Haskell gave CBN News and other media a tour of kibbutz Kfar Aza almost 4 weeks after the horrific attacks of October 7th.
Everything has just kind of frozen in time. Nothing has been touched.
Every home here sustaining some level of destruction. Windows blown out, furniture and clothes strewn all over the place.
This is taken out of a horror movie, out of a horror scene. Just unbelievable.
This is part of a Hamas rocket.
Major Diamond of Israel's Defense Forces telling CBN News that once terrorists took over the kibbutz, hundreds of Gazans then broke through the border fence.
Clothing that you see scattered here, this wasn't done by IDF. This was done by Hamas. And Gazans just came in here and started to loot the houses and just steal whatever they could.
And then there's the smell that still lingers in the air all these many weeks later.
The one thing you immediately recognize, you can smell the smell of death here. Blood still splattered on the floor, on the couch, along with hundreds of bullet marks. These seem to be small caliber weapons, bullets, and clearly this was much, much bigger.
The reports are that many of the homes in this kibbutz sustained RPG attacks, and in the situations when Hamas wasn't able to actually get the residents out, they ended up setting them ablaze.
Mayor Ophir, like so many of the residents here, had spent years taking numerous initiatives to foster peace between Jews and Palestinians living in Gaza.
Many people here in this town who were peace-loving people who looked on how to advance and better the life of Israelis and Palestinians were murdered here in front of their homes with their family members, some of them burned to the ground in these houses. And when Hamas came and did that, they burned and they murdered people with that kind of vision.
Parsons, whose Christian organization has helped build more than 200 bomb shelters throughout southern Israel, says despite the ongoing war with Hamas, they are here for the long haul.
Look, we're going to stand with these communities and help them rebuild. We've been doing it for over 10 years now with bomb shelters and firefighting equipment and things they need to stay here. It's not going to deter us. We're going to stand with Israel even stronger and help these communities rebuild here along the Gaza border.
George Thomas, CBN News, kibbutz Kfar Aza in southern Israel.
And if you've ever visited those beautiful kibbutzes in the south of Israel, like Kfar Aza, like kibbutz Barrett, or the one I visited, which is kibbutz Narim, these are beautiful people with beautiful, pristine houses and gardens where they say 90% of the time living here is paradise, but that 10% of the time is like hell. But sadly, what we saw on Saturday, the 7th of October, was like the gates of hell unleashed against these communities. So please keep them in our prayers. Please show support and solidarity. Tim, what is your reaction to that report as it's all coming to light now that Israel is sending journalists to Kibbutz Barrett, to Kfar Aza? These are the kind of worst atrocities that we've seen committed by Hamas to make sure that the world knows exactly what happened to the Jewish people then, just like the British Army and the US Army let the world know the horrors of what happened in Bergen-Belsen during the Holocaust.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, we just mentioned the barbarity and the sickness and the demonic acts that took place. But I think what happened straight away was a lot of people was denying or saying, prove it, prove it, prove it. And, Israel took time. It's not like, there was incidences where PIJ bombed a hospital in Gaza that, it was one of their own bombs. And straight away they said 500 killed. But Israel's taken time to collate the evidence, to find out who the victims are, and they have to release the details. Sadly, they had to show journalists some of the horrific images because people were it's like Holocaust denial in real time. And so, as we're learning about this, I think we mentioned the Holocaust and we mentioned the Nazis, but what you're seeing is, I think one major difference was the Nazis used to have to get drunk every night because they couldn't handle what they were seeing when they were shooting Jews in the back of their head. It was traumatic for them. That's why they said, let's gas them because it's hard for the soldiers. But actually, Hamas, they were celebrating, they were full of glee, they were ringing their parents saying, Mum, 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 I've killed 10 Jews. And I think as the details are coming out, I think more and more are shocking and traumatic. It's historic.
Yeah. And Hayley, you got a special little wristband you're wearing, which is a yellow wristband. Share with us why you're wearing that and why it's so important to wear the wristband that you're wearing.
We have been attending the hostage Bring Them Home events that have been carried out in the last month, and these were started to giving them out because we really don't want people to forget. The Jewish community actually set this initiative, and I've had mine on for the last 3 weeks so that I remember to pray, remember that this is real. We cannot look away, and that's the most important thing. We can't just forget this is happening, can't forget the terrible human tragedy and pain that is occurring, and that there is a little 8-year-old, a 9-month-old, all different ages that are somewhere in Gaza in the hands of brutal terrorists.
And just to share with us, I think, the magnitude of this evil, because I think, when we look at our mainstream news, which is pretty much sanitized, we don't get a sense of how horrific and evil Hamas are. And I think we can actually compare their Islamist ideology to that of the Nazism. And you can see that influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the godfather of international terrorism, the Islamic influence combined with that influence of Nazism has produced this lethal cocktail ideology that we're seeing today in the likes of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Iranian regime, ISIS, and as well, of course, not forgetting the terror organization Hezbollah. So share with us how, for example, we know organizations and political ideologies are so evil because at their core is Jew hatred, is their driving ideology.
So yeah, as a Christian, as a pastor, we often point out this is spiritual, it's satanic. Read Revelation 12. The dragon hates the woman who's the Jewish people because she gave the world the child Jesus. And so Satan hates the Jews, always has done, and has tried to annihilate them many, many times. And, in every generation there's something. And I think, with this mix of Islamic fundamental that wants to subjugate and control and dominate and move into different places and bring the whole world under their doctrine, mix that with the fact that, on these Hamas fighters, some of them were found with Mein Kampf translated into Arabic. Mix that with that satanic Haman Hitler spirit, and you've got this force of evil that's willing to kill and behead babies and do the kind of things that we've seen. I mean, it's demonic. And then people, followers and people in the West, even the far left, are claiming they're freedom fighters. These are rapists, child murderers, elderly abusers and kidnappers and killers. I mean, it's the worst crimes of humanity that you could imagine.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at this excellent IDF report, that's the Israeli Defense Report, of one of the IDF soldiers going into one of the hospitals in Gaza, and this is what they found.
I'm here in Gaza City. We are here
next to a house of a terrorist. This is one of the senior terrorists who is the head of the operational naval operations that led the raids into Israel. His house is right next to a school. His house is 200 yards from the hospital of Rantisi. Next to his house, there is a tunnel. Now I want to show you an operational tunnel. The tunnel is built with electricity. We first saw the solar panels, then the electricity goes here, and it goes down directly to the tunnel. Now you can see the tunnel. You can see the tunnel. The tunnel is let down more than 20 meters down. The rowboat found a door that is bulletproof. It's explosives proof, so it looks like a hard evidence, a clear evidence that the hospital direction is connected. This is a covered tunnel. It's part of the same floor and it slides down here. So it's a covered tunnel so nobody can find it. This is Rantisi Hospital. And this is the place where I showed you the tunnel. I want you to see. This is the back side of the hospital. Hamas used this hospital. Tonight we have entered into this building. I will show you the evidence. Let's enter into the hospital. We're now entering into the area of the hospital where we had found the evidence. This operation was conducted by Israeli Special Unit, the Israeli Navy SEALs. This is still an operation that is conducting. And I'm showing you the first evidence to see. We are now in the area of the basement of the hospital. I want to show you a room where we found all the gear, the operational gear of Hamas. Hamas is using hospitals, like we showed the evidence in Shifa Hospital. In other hospitals, we are now seeing it in live in Rantisi Hospital. An operation still conducting right now. Look at what Hamas is holding inside the hospital. I want you to understand, this kind of gear is a gear for a major fight. These are explosives. These are vests with explosives. Yeah, it's a body vest for terrorists to explode on forces. Among hospitals, among patients, we have hand grenades, Kalashnikovs, and then we have the RPGs. People shooting RPGs from hospitals. This is Hamas firing RPGs for hospitals. The world has to understand who is Israel fighting against. We are now in the basement, and in this basement we found a motorcycle. They were all used in the massacre of the 7th of October. They even have bullets in this motorcycle. So they came back from the massacre on the 7th of October into Rantisi Hospital with hostages on a motorcycle. We're still researching this. Yards from here, we find the chair, a woman, clothes, and a rope next to the legs. And look above this, look above it. It's a baby bottle. It's a baby bottle in a basement, above a World Health Organization sign. This is a suspicion for an area where hostages were being held. We're now looking at an infrastructure. You don't need to build something improvisedly in a hospital in the basement. Unless you want to hold someone in the basement, you don't want anyone to see him. Again, we're in the same basement, and here we see diapers, and we see, I don't know, maybe something, we see diapers. I want you to see this room. It's in the basement of the hospital. We can see this area is a closed area from the rest of the hospital. We can see the ventilation air that was done improvisedly to this area. And we can see infrastructures that was built in here, toilets, shower, a small kitchen, will provide the terrorists their needs. Also conduct a hideout
a hideout where terrorists take hostages and hideout. And I will show you now the evidence. You're now entering into the room where we suspect the hostages were being held. I want you to look at this room. People are putting curtains with nothing above, just wall. No reason to put here a curtain unless you want to film hostages and deliver movies. And I will show you more evidence. In this room, there is a list. This list, in Arabic, this list says, we are in an operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift guarding the people that were here.
And that was courtesy of our friends at the IDF, who do an amazing job to actually destroy Hamas and protect the citizens not only of Israel but also of Gaza from this extreme, dangerous terrorist organisation. And I guarantee you will not see that report on Sky News or ITV or BBC, but you've seen it here on the Middle East Report because we care about the truth and we want to show what Hamas is doing. The fact is, we saw there they had the motorcycles that were actually used on the terror attack on the 7th of October and found the place where those hostages had stayed. And we have to continue to pray that the hostages would be returned unharmed and they would be supernaturally protected by the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. We see, for example, Hayley, that with this conflict and with many conflicts in Israel, as a direct result of the Israelis defending themselves from Islamist terrorism, we see a huge spike in anti-Semitism, or as I prefer to call it, Jew hatred, because people have become desensitized to the word anti-Semitism. I think Jew hatred is a better word. And so effectively what we're seeing now is that Jewish people in this country are being blamed for the actions of the Israeli government and Israel. And of course, the levels of Jew hatred that we're seeing have just absolutely escalated to we haven't seen anything like this really until the 1930s. What are your thoughts on this huge rise of Jew hatred that we're seeing, and also your relationship with the Jewish community? How are they responding to this hatred?
I think the Jewish community are frightened. It's rising at an exponential rate, 1,500% rise in the last 4 weeks, which is highest than records began. I know I've heard stories of people going into their usual shops and all of the kosher section is now gone because of the conflict in Israel. And whatever is happening in Israel is affecting the Jewish people because it's one, really. We're talking about the people of Israel, whether people realise that or not. They think that they are not being Jew haters. Well, then why are people in this country being attacked? Why are swastikas being sprayed on people's front doors? Why are people being shouted at in the street? Why is food being removed from shops? This is a direct attack on Jews everywhere. And it's dressed up as anti-Zionism. You know, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionistic. Or there's always a reason that it's not Jew hatred, but really it is. It's all rooted in Jew hatred.
And Tim, both of you and myself, we attended the ICJ London conference in Westminster, the heart of, really the heart of Westminster, and just around the corner was all these mass Palestinian protests taking place. And having walked through that, it was a scary thing. And not only that, you could feel the hatred, you could feel the Jew hatred, the anger. And I've always wondered what it would have been like to be in Munich in the 1930s with the rise of Nazism. And it felt like exactly that, a kind of Nazi rally, and just coming face to face with evil. So share with us your thoughts on these, on what the police has allowed to happen, essentially calling for jihad on our streets to mobilize Islamic countries around the world to destroy Israel, chants of genocide against the Jewish people regarding Palestine will be free from the river to the sea. We know that's a chant of genocide, and this general hatred of Israel and the Jewish people that we've seen in our streets of London, particularly what happened last weekend on Armistice Day.
Absolutely, and here's the thing, it seems to be getting worse every week. And so people were questioning the police, why are they allowing this? And, you know, the first week you got placards, and then, you know, you got the same genocidal chants that you just mentioned. But then the second week you got intifada and, you know, jihad. And then where we are now, last week, you know, it was the placards, completely anti-Semitic placards. You had somebody scream death to all Jews. And you had, you know, all kinds of attacks and people looking for Jews to attack, and people are asking, why is this allowed to go ahead, especially on Armistice Day? And like you said, Simon, it does feel like 1930s. The atmosphere, the tension, the Jew hatred, it feels like Nazi Germany, and that's why, you know, for us as Christian leaders, and for us, you know, with what we're trying to do, is we're saying, let's look at what it was like then, because you can see the same spirit at work today. And let's see how the Christians responded then, and let's learn from that so that we're not going to be silent, you know, we're not going to be passive. We need to do something about it now, because you can see what's coming. The Jewish people can see what's coming. That's why there's a lot of fear. You know, they've been here before. And this, when it starts with chanting on the streets and all of these placards, it always ends in violence, always, and you can see that.
Yeah. So, Hayley, do you want to unpack how you guys made the kind of news headline with your vigil that you're organising up in Golders Green to bring comfort to Israel, but also particularly to show comfort to the Jewish people by getting Christians to go to Golders Green, which is the heartland of the Jewish community in North London, and to show your support and solidarity to the Jewish community this time of rising Jew hatred. So share with us how the police managed to stop your vigil and why they were so afraid.
Well, it was actually stopped twice. We originally planned to gather in the outside Israeli embassy, and we were told 5 days after we applied that actually there's now going to be a youth Palestinian movement coming through there, and it would be not advisable to have it there because we might be at risk, i.e. we can't protect you type thing. But you guys go ahead if you want to. So we decided, let's move it 7 miles away, completely a different area, and they can do their thing, have their free speech, and we're going to go in and bring comfort. 2 days before the event, we got a call very early in the morning saying, you know, we have had some indication of a viral tweet that is saying, you know, we need to go and teach these Zionists a lesson. Everyone converged after the rally. And because they were already together, it was like, seemed like a sensible thing. Let's go and go to Golders Green. And we did not want to bring trouble to the very community that we were trying to bring comfort, to say, you know, we are here, we do care, we see the pain, we see the unfairness of everything, and you have got Christians in this country who care. And actually the event went viral really in the Christian world as well. So it was fantastic to have that support from the Christian world, but it was also very disappointing to have to kind of cancel because the police couldn't assure us of safety.
Right, so I mean, we're in a crazy, bizarre world that we're living in, aren't we? That we have members of Islamic extremist organisations that are able to chant jihad on the streets of London. We hear incitement to genocide. We hear these kind of Palestinian marches, and that's exactly what it is, and that's why I'm calling out for what it is. We also see the kind of demonstrations of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel behaviour, and yet the police won't allow you to organise a pro-Christian vigil solidarity prayer walk for the Jewish community.
And you know, I mean, Suella Braverman said it seems like the police are taking sides. And it kind of feels like that. So, you know, a big response often is the majority of the protesters are peaceful, but they're all still, they know, you know, there's enough publicity to know that that chant to the Jewish people is genocidal. And they know it upsets, but they keep doing it en masse. When they say, oh, most people aren't holding these anti-Semitic placards, the fact that they're walking there unchallenged means that everybody's either complicit or they're in agreement with these placards, you know. And the fact that these chants are going on and they weren't arrested at the time, and when you see other things, you know, like Just Stop the Oil or whatever, they're straight away arrested. They're not being challenged at the time, and it's being allowed, and it's allowed to grow. This is why, you know, we keep saying it feels like 1930s Germany. You know, these rallies are going ahead, and they're full of hate, and they're full of genocidal chants, and it's like, you know, what do we do as Christians? How do we respond? We can't, you know, be silent. We can't be inactive. We've got to learn from times past.
So let's have a look at this excellent CBN News video that discuss how we're seeing a rise of Jew hatred on university campuses. And you can really compare what we're seeing on university campuses in the States to what's happening in the streets of America, but also, sadly, in the streets of London, in the streets of Manchester, of Glasgow, of Belfast, and some of other major cities throughout the UK, including Cardiff.
After the horrific Hamas attack on Israel, students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison chanted, "Glory to the martyrs."
Glory to the martyrs!
Cornell University professor Russell Rickford called the Hamas killings exhilarating.
It was exhilarating, it was energetic.
And an instructor at Stanford has been suspended for allegedly making Jewish students stand in a corner while publicly referring to them as colonizers. Many colleges and universities have allowed and even promoted pro-Hamas, anti-Jewish hatred for decades. The attack on Israel has shown just where that policy has led. Dr. Zachary Marshall is editor-in-chief at Campus Reform.
What we're seeing this week on college campuses is the culmination of 2 generations of activist scholars using college classrooms to create indoctrination camps where they use leftist ideology and anti-Israel critiques and work as a mask to perpetuate anti-Semitism.
The anti-Israel BDS movement, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, has been allowed to flourish on campuses nationwide and uses the chant "From the river to the sea" in their protest, calling for the destruction of Israel.
From the river to the sea!
After the Hamas attack on Israel, the BDS movement's website posted and later deleted that it supported the slaughter of Israelis by Hamas, calling it heroic and justified.
And not only is it a moral failing and an intellectual failing and just a scandal, but it's a strategic threat to the American Republic.
Dexter Van Zyl of Middle East Forum says the Hamas terror attack finally exposed the BDS movement for what it's really about, the destruction of the State of Israel.
It's been a long time coming, and the October 7th attack exposed it.
We support the Antifada!
The major campus group behind the BDS movement is Students for Justice in Palestine. After the Hamas attack, Boston University's SJP chapter posted that victory is ours. Universities like Harvard have been embarrassed and lost donations because of pro-Hamas support. It's gotten so bad that Ezekiel Emanuel, longtime Democrat and brother of Rahm Emanuel, wrote an editorial in Wednesday's New York Times entitled "The Moral Deficiencies of a Liberal Education."
It's terrifying and sad that it took the death of over 1,000 Jews in Israel to direct people to the totalitarian forces that are now, running amok on college campuses in the United States. But that's what it took.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And sadly, we're seeing similar behaviour, which is abhorrent in the streets of London, in our capital, and has been going on for ever since Israel was attacked by Hamas. Anyone would have thought that it was Israel that was attacking Gaza, not Israel responding in self-defense to the greatest mass terrorist attack in Israel's history. And Hayley, you guys are organising a solidarity prayer gathering for Israel on Sunday, the 19th of November at 4 p.m. in central London. Share with our viewers who are watching on social media how they can be part of this prayer gathering and support that show solidarity with Israel and the Jewish community at this dangerous time.
Yeah, I know that so many people have wanted to be involved in doing something because we've all felt horrified at what's been happening in Israel. And so we've put on this event on Sunday, the 19th at 4 o'clock, and it's just a show of solidarity and prayer for anyone with Judeo-Christian values to get down to central London. And it's going to be a beautiful unity with Jews and Gentiles, Christians. We're going to be praying. We've got some amazing speakers from all of the pro-Israel organizations and the Jewish community, and we're going to sing, and it's just going to be a really beautiful evening of solidarity and prayer. And so please get down there, 4 o'clock, wrap up warm, and bring a torch, because there's going to be a time in the event where it's going to be dark, we're going to turn on our lights, and we're going to be the light in the darkness and spread the light.
And Tim, how important is it as Christian supporters of Israel and the Jewish people that we counter the haters, that we organise, like you guys have done, protests or rallies of solidarity for Israel and the Jewish people, but done in a spirit of love, done in a spirit of peace, showing God's love and support for the Jewish people at this very dangerous time in our history?
Absolutely. You know, we really see this as a moment, actually. It is historical. And this is a moment when we can, like I've said a few times, learn from the past. A majority, in fact, Nazi Germany was mainly Christian. We're talking 70% evangelical Christian, Lutheran, and the rest mainly Catholic. And apart from the 15% that actively spoke out or tried to help the Jews or spoke out against the Nazis, we quote Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the rest are either, 20% were really pro-Nazi and anti-Semitic, trying to eradicate Jew and Israel from the Bible, but you had about 65%, they're called the silent majority. We don't know what they thought. They were having conferences discussing things like women in leadership in 1942 when they knew what was going on in the camps. So we look back at that and say, we've got to be different. We've got a moment, this is a historical moment where if people were to look back on our generation, did we do enough? Have we spoken out? And there is times in Christian past when Christians have to be vocal. Think about Martin Luther King Jr., and that was a march for peace. Or think about William Wilberforce, he had to counter slavery. This feels like a moment for us where we have to speak out against anti-Semitism, but show our love. We're praying, we believe, God is sovereign. In a way we don't need to protest because we trust God, but just be seen and heard by the Jewish community so they know they're not alone. We're saying, we stand with you, like Ruth to Naomi, or, we stand with you, we love you, we're in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder.
And Hayley, it's an important reminder from those experts in anti-Semitism or Jew hatred. They always say that what starts with the Jewish people never finishes with the Jewish people.
That's right.
So share with us the danger of Christian apathy and indifference towards Israel and the plight of the Jewish people with this rise of Jew hatred. Knowing first it comes to the Jewish people, then it destroys entire civilizations and cultures and societies. So share with us how this matters not only to the Israelis and the Jewish people, but it matters to all of us.
Yeah. We can't be found asleep. We cannot be found to be sleeping in this matter because it's so important. And I feel that Israel is really holding back a serious evil. This fundamentalism, this Islamic regime is out for everybody. And they're just step one. And we need to, when I was praying about this, I just had this sense that Israel is like Moses. When Moses was in that battle when he was holding his hands out, and then it was Aaron and Hur who were holding their hands. And I feel like Israel is the Moses holding back this battle, but they need support. They need support. Yes, Israel is strong, and they are a small people, but they are a mighty people, and they are survivors. But they are like the Moses holding back this darkness. And I feel like the Gentile church and Gentiles who support Israel have to be like the Aaron and the Hur, holding up their hands saying, we are with you, you're not alone. And it's so important that Christians do not be apathetic, do not be indifferent to this, because it affects everybody.
Absolutely. And Tim, I think something important comes to mind here, and this is that we can't keep quiet, can we? We're a generation, as you mentioned, in the 1930s and the 1940s that failed the Jewish community. It feels like we've been given an opportunity to speak up and say enough is enough. We will not allow Jew hatred. So share with us how this is so important that Christians get involved in this battle, to pray for Israel and the Jewish people, and to stand up against the evil, which is Jew hatred, that we are seeing rise in our day, which we know the origins of this are absolutely satanic.
Absolutely, and it's like, you know, like we've said, history does judge a generation, and you can say that generation, or there were too many quiet and too many inactive, and even in response to this, you know, we were dismayed. Why aren't more leaders saying stuff? Why aren't more, you know, people speaking out on their social media, heads of denominations or whatever? And we think, you know, this is actually, like you said, this is a moment. You know, this is a moment to make ourselves heard. This is a moment when history will look back on us. We believe that, you know, this is close to God's heart. He loves his people. Jesus loves his people, and I think this pleases God when we you know, speak out and love and extend our arms of love and support to his people. And like Hay said, you know, this is like a moment to just stand with them, hold their arms up, be together. And I think, you know, I really do believe this. I think it's a spiritual battle. And I think, you know, being quiet and sitting on the fence, it's impossible. This is good and evil, light and dark, wrong and right, and this is a time you cannot sit on the fence, you can't hide away, you can't busy yourself with other things. This is too key. I think this is the time to actually come out, say something, show some courage, and just say, you know what, whatever. Like Esther said, if I die, I die, but I'm going to stand with the Jewish people.
Amen. And Hayley, we have less than 2 minutes of the programme. So I think it's important that as Christians, we are not fearful, because love casts out fear. So what advice have you got any viewers watching this programme today that may be scared about coming out to support Israel at a pro-Israel gathering and show that love and support to Israel and the Jewish community? Please bring reassurance.
I think this is about life and death for Israelis. They are literally facing life and death, and we might be facing someone be mean to us or challenge us. The risk to us is very, very little. We have been to every single pro-Israel event in the last 4 weeks. There has never been any trouble, ever, apart from someone bibbing their horn. And I think it's just this psychological warfare that is being rained upon the West to make us believe that they are more at risk to us standing up than they are. And that's why we have to stand up and show that we are strong, we are united. The Judeo-Christian values that hold this country together and that uphold Christianity and Judaism, it needs to be united. And we need to say that we're strong, actually, and we're not going to cow to pressure. We're not going to cow because someone might be mean to us on social media. And yeah, so I would encourage everybody, speak up, be strong, God is with you.
Amen. So Hayley and Tim, thank you so much for being my guests on the Middle East Report today. You're definitely a power couple, so thank you very much. And I want to thank you for watching this programme at home. We can't be indifferent to the rise of evil. We can't be indifferent to the rise of Jew hatred, because Jew hatred consumes the Jewish people, then it consumes our society. And we know that the Jewish people are God's covenant people. If God loves them, so should we. So let's show our support and solidarity to Israel and the Jewish people. So thank you for watching this week's edition of the Middle East Report.